Drawing characters can be so much fun, but the hard part is to make them look alive. You can add a lot of details and interest to your character, but it won't fix the pose that is boring or stiff. In this video, I will analyze some great and not so great character illustrations to help you make your drawings look more interesting and believable. The first skill that you will need to develop when drawing characters and creating poses for them is to be able to identify the center of gravity. Now, this is very important for having a balanced pose. Now, balance is mainly important for static poses, while dynamic poses are always out of balance. So let's take this guy here on the left first. His center of gravity is very easy to find. It's just simply in the middle because it's a completely symmetrical pose. Now, these type of illustrations are really fun, and it doesn't mean that the character is too stiff because there's still some interest. Especially, I love the way that the hair is moving towards the right and also how the arms fold behind the big round belly. And notice that even one of the legs is behind the pelvis while the other leg is in front. Now, of course, once you start introducing overlap on the character and add some movement, it becomes more of a dynamic pose. Here, it's a little bit more tricky to find the center of gravity, but normally what you can take as a reference point is the main mass of the ribcage and the pelvis. And somewhere in between those two is where you can start drawing a line downwards. So from here, I think the center of gravity would be somewhere around there. And the main weight is carried on this leg, which is touching the floor, while the other one is lifted up. So that is clearly at the moment not carrying any weight. Even though this is a flat style illustration, we still have that clear overlap that I mentioned earlier, which always helps to add more interest and movement to your character. So in this case, instead of using perspective or foreshortening, it's just simply setting up things in front and behind and defining the depth that way. It is usually a good practice to have things further back a bit darker. That's not that visible here, so these two legs where they meet, they slightly blend into each other, but you can see the difference in the shade on the arm. So this arm is slightly darker than the one on the right side. And that again is a subtle way of indicating depth. Now again, we have a lovely illustration here where the center of gravity would be probably somewhere around here, slightly shifted to the right leg or to the left side of the image. And again, in this case, this is the leg that carries more weight compared to the one that's stretched out. In these type of poses, you need to pay attention for the pelvis rotation, which would be shifted. The leg that carries more weight will go higher up, and the other leg will go further down, and you will need to have an opposite direction set up on the shoulders. So in this case, the right shoulder or the shoulder on the left side is going to drop and get closer to the increased point on the pelvis. So even though it seems like a simple pose, there's actually a lot of consideration there to make it look as good as this. Now, in some cases, you might want to use the environment to add some movement to your illustration instead of the character. So if you want the character to be more static or even stiff, you can still make the illustration look fun and interesting by using things like the wind. Again, here the hair movement and even these plants clearly indicate that there is a wind towards the right side of the image. And that is nicely contrasted or balanced out with the direction in which the character is looking at the moment. Not to mention the placement of the bag and the cute little animal inside it. Now here we have another really cool pose, which might seem very simple and straightforward. Again, quite symmetrical, even though we are looking at the character from the side. But what makes this look fun is the accompanying character, which in this case is the dog, which defines and establishes the depth really well. So we can see how the two characters interact with each other and how the dog goes behind this leg here, but is in front of the other leg. And even though, thanks to that symmetrical triangle that the character is creating, it feels like a very stable pose, notice that subtle little detail here, the raised foot, which indicates that the character is just about to step forward. These subtle hints are crucial to make your characters look alive. Moving on, we have a few more interesting poses. We have again a side view of this lady here on the left. And what I love about this is even though that the legs are completely behind one another, so we can't really see them separately, we still have a sense of depth thanks to the hand on the waist and also the way the hair is flowing behind the head and the shoulders. But probably the coolest thing about this pose is, once again, even though it feels very stiff, there is a lot of attitude and personality in it. Thanks to the fact that the shoulders are way further back, and that creates an out of balance, but very feminine and very cool pose. And you can see with the other two examples that even a simple thing like looking at a phone can be depicted in so many different ways. So once again, we have a very nice balanced pose, but still has a lot of attitude and a lot of style. And I particularly love these sharp angles on the shoulder and on the hair that makes, again, the character a bit more edgy. This illustration shows well how important it is to get your silhouette right, because in this case, we don't have any shading, so overlap is not indicated at all, and even the color palette is extremely limited, so we have pretty much 3 colors. So even the hair and the phone completely blends into each other. And like I said before, the 2 knees somewhere join together, but we can't really tell which leg is in front of the other. But because the silhouette reads really well and there is a clear center of gravity, this pose again works brilliantly. And I think the key to the personality of this character is the way one eye is hidden behind the phone and the other one is speaking towards the right side of the frame. Now here on the right side, we have a great example of a dynamic pose where it is completely out of balance. So when you're walking or running, you are constantly out of balance and you are just about to fall. But in certain cases, like in action poses, sometimes even have the character completely floating. And that's exactly what is happening here. So we can clearly see that both legs are in the air and the momentum and the direction of movement is further emphasized by the flowing hair and the foreshortening on the hand. Now, when it comes to dynamic poses, for me, Patrick Brown is one of the artists that first comes to mind. And if you want to check out the way he works and the way he creates his characters, make sure you check out the video interview which I've done with him a couple of months ago. You can find a link to that video in the description below. To be able to draw dynamic poses and action poses like this, you not only have to understand anatomy, but also you have to understand how bodies work in motion. And for that, the best place to go to is the website called Bodies in Motion by Scott Eaton, another brilliant artist who I met a couple of times. I attended some of his workshops, and his site is probably the best resource for practicing and understanding how the human body shifts and twists around while in motion. You can register on the site, it's free, and then you can start using features like the quick draw option, where you can choose what type of module you would like to focus on. Let me just show you how this works. Once I click on start drawing, it's going to randomly select an image, which we will get here in the middle. And on the right side, we can also see this movement in action. And we have 2 minutes to draw this. So this is like a quick sketch. And then once you are done, you can move on to the next one and so on and so forth. This is a great exercise and it's good to keep an eye on the movement on the right, which really helps you to understand how this pose is actually working. So once again, because it's in motion or it's a dynamic pose, it's going to be out of balance. And it's more difficult to get this right in drawing than drawing a static pose. Before we continue, I just wanted to let you know about our creative membership program. For a small monthly fee, you get access to over 200 hours of Adobe certified online training courses. Master all the tools and skills needed to become a professional graphic designer or illustrator. As a pro member, you will get mentoring from me and my team, access to webinars, student forum, and creative briefs to help you build an outstanding portfolio. Pro members can also download the project files for all of our YouTube tutorials. Sign up at yesimadesigner.com/memberships and start your free trial today. And now let's head back to the tutorial. Now, another thing that you can rely on when you are drawing characters and you want to create interesting poses are props. So a common one for fantasy characters would be weapons. And we can see a few examples here straight away. We have an illustration here on the left, which is a little bit stiff, and I think mainly because of the angle of the weapon. It's a little bit too close to the character, while here we have a much more interesting pose with the weapon much further away. And even though the character's limbs are completely stretched out, it still creates a really unique power pose, which is further emphasized by the clenched fist on the right side. And also, like before, there is a subtle indication of the environment. The wind is blowing that ribbon to the left side. Of course, when it comes to props, they don't always have to be touching the ground. Like here with this really stylized and funny exaggerated character, we have the sword lifted up, but again, the reason why this character looks good, besides the amazing design, is the way that we have this massive arm in front of the body and the other arm behind it. And by sticking to fantasy characters, we have another brilliant illustration here, which shows again how well it can work if you are lifting your character completely up from the ground. It adds again so much interest and movement to it. Not to mention the lovely overlap of the sword being behind the head, and also this cape that not only goes behind the character, but then it wraps around it and guides the viewer's attention back into the focal point of the image, which is the head. Now that we understand the difference between dynamic and static poses, there's just one thing that you really want to avoid, and that is drawing stiff characters. When you are looking at these three characters at the bottom, at first glance, they might look very similar, but by analyzing them a little bit closer, we can see that out of the three, I would say that the only stiff character is this one here on the right. The one on the left, although doesn't do much movement, still has a very lovely appeal to it, mainly because of its round shape, and that is further emphasized by the round eyes and even the tail in the back. But this character here in the middle has just so much interest, even though it lacks the dynamism of some of the previous characters that we've seen. The appeal and interest here was mainly achieved by the subtle twist in the body. So the head is looking straight at us, but the body actually is turning towards the right side of the frame. This illustration also has beautiful shading, so all of these colors almost make it look three-dimensional. And this is again crucial in establishing the depth and perspective on the character. Now, compared to these, the yellow monster on the right feels very flat and, as I said before, quite stiff. It's not a bad illustration, it's just one of those things that you should try to avoid when you are drawing your own characters, whether they are monsters or human. Now, some illustrations at first might look very stiff, but there might be a reason for that. In particular, young kids might understand these type of illustrations a bit better than more complex and exaggerated illustrations like this one on the right. And before I show you a really cool app that can help you to draw more interesting characters, I just wanted to show you a few examples of illustrations that, once again, are not bad at all. However, you can see that even talented illustrators sometimes fall into the trap of creating stiff characters. And this is usually due to the combination of all of those things that we talked about. So it's either not having a good silhouette, or not having enough overlap, or not choosing confidently between a dynamic or static pose. If you would like me to give you feedback on your drawings, maybe consider joining our Pro membership, where you can submit your work and I can give you professional feedback. You can join this program today and start your free trial by clicking on the link in the description below. Now, as I promised, let me show you an app that helped me a lot in improving the way I draw characters. It's called ArtPose Pro. It's not a free app, but it has a trial mode, and also you only have to buy it once, so you don't have to pay a subscription fee. It has a lot of features, and I'm not going to cover everything. I will really just focus on the basics of setting up a character and creating an interesting pose. So there's two things you can do. Either manually set up a pose by going into selecting the joints. Let me just maybe select the shoulder here, starting moving it around. I can select these other joints as well, move the arm out, and then move this one down, maybe here, and so on and so forth. So you can see every aspect of the body can be changed. We can turn it around, shift it around, and so on and so forth. But if you don't want to waste time with that, you can even go into selecting a default pose. Let me just select something interesting like this one here. This is more of an action pose. And then when we switch back to the camera, we can turn around and see it from all kinds of different angles. So we can establish a more interesting viewpoint. And of course, you can even further increase the perspective or reduce the perspective if you want to. But what I love about this app is that we can also check the silhouette. So if we come here in the lighting options, I can turn on this feature with which I can check the character in black on white or vice versa, black background and white character. So I can immediately see that even though this is a cool pose, the viewpoint is probably not the best. So I can go back to set the camera up slightly differently, maybe somewhere there. Let's just check again. And yeah, that reads already a lot better as a silhouette. As I said, there's a lot of settings that you can use. You can change the style of the character, make it look like a marble statue, or go back into that more illustrative style that we've seen before. You can even see the muscles if you wanted to, both in color or in grayscale. And you can even increase the muscles on the character by adjusting this value here on the left. So you can make it look huge or go back to more of a normal build. Now, whenever you use references, I would recommend not to draw over them directly. Instead, keep them on the side, maybe on a screen, or maybe even print them out while you're drawing, and really just use them to understand and study the pose from different angles. The great thing about having a mannequin, whether it's a physical one or a digital one, is that you can set it up in either a static or a dynamic pose and look at it from all kinds of different angles. And that's all I wanted to cover in this video. I hope you found it useful. If you want to learn more about how to get better at drawing, make sure you check out the other videos in this series. You can find again the links in the description below. And if you don't want to miss the next action-packed episodes coming up, make sure you subscribe right now. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we release new videos. Click on the link on my right and start your membership today to get access to over 200 hours of training courses and personal mentoring by me and my team of creative professionals. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.